Welcome everyone to the 2021 West Side Democrats Candidate Forum for Manhattan Borough President and Council District 6. We'll have two forums back to back. First, Council District 6, first Manhattan Borough President will start. We'll have all the candidates. They've agreed to join us. We're grateful to have them. And then we will have all the candidates for Council District 6 immediately following that. And that portion will be moderated by Rachel Landis. I am moderating this portion, and my name is Pablo Zavayo. So it is great to be with everyone here, and thank you for coming. Obviously today is a difficult day for many of us who care about our democracy and who care about the peaceful transfer of power, who care about safety, is particularly in the light of yesterday's attacks, which had such heavy racist and anti-Semitic overtones that permeated through all of the event and destroyed one of the great sanctified areas of our republic. So in light of that, and to get us started, I wanted to introduce the president of West Side Democrats, Richard Oppenheimer, who will offer a few words of welcome.
Hi, everybody. Pablo just stated most of what I wanted to say, which is terrific, so I'll be brief. Yes, yesterday was a moment of darkness and light. Yes, our new leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, called it a day of infamy. Here on the Upper West Side and the borough of Manhattan, we are proud leaders as a club and as a county, since the removal of a boss by the name of Carmine DeSapio. And we elect in a way that way surpasses any other counties in the city of New York. So I'm really excited that this wonderful new club, which is growing, will be hosting this very special forum for Borough President and CD6. And I want to also say thank you to Alec Barrett, who will be handling Q&A.
Thanks, Richard.
Yes, and then sorry, I should have introduced Alec Barrett, who is with us. We're grateful for him. He co-moderated and helped keep the time for the Manhattan DA Forum that we organized earlier this week that many of you were at. So we're really grateful for doing double duty this week and for helping us tonight. So we're still waiting for our first candidate, but that gives us a moment to explain the format of tonight's event. Tonight we'll have all borough president candidates. They will start with 3 minutes to speak for themselves, and then they will be asked questions for 6 more minutes. Alec will be keeping the time. The questions have been partly submitted by you in the Google form we've had. I'm sure more will come in the Q&A button at the bottom. And I might add, please submit your question in the Q&A button and not in the chat. That's the easiest way for us to get it. And then some people prepared some submitted in those fashions. So we are so grateful for all the candidates who are joining us. We have, just in order of appearance tonight, we have Lindsay Boylan, who is here with us today. Thank you, Lindsay. We have Kimberly Watkins. We have Councilmember Mark Levine. We have Elizabeth Caputo. We have Senator Brad Hoyman and Councilmember Ben Kalos. So that is how we're doing tonight. So with all of that, we're ready to get started. Hello, Lindsay Boylan. Please, thank you for coming here and joining us. And please take it away with 3 minutes in opening remarks.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you can hear me.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Well, I do want to address kind of what you've already mentioned in terms of what our country's experiencing and what happened yesterday, this terrorist attack. Having interned on Capitol Hill, the most exciting thing I did as a high schooler was give tours of the rotunda, and it inspired a lot of what I later would do in terms of going to college and majoring in political science and wanting to be in government. So, you know, we all have a connection to what's happened, and it's deeply troubling. And I'm just so appreciative of an opportunity to speak tonight to all of you and share why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I'm the best candidate to be borough president. So I came to New York interested in urban planning, wanting to be the next Jane Jacobs and think about how to make cities work for people. The fall of my senior year, Hurricane Katrina happened. And the whole question was, how do you rebuild a city more equitably? Of course, we know that's not what happened in New Orleans, but the question has motivated my entire career. And I think it's really pertinent for this job in this moment in time, in this challenging time. We have perhaps some of the most challenging times ahead of us. We don't know how much federal aid we will get. And in my mind, the borough president's job is all about how you use all the tools at our disposal to make this borough, and as a result, this city, more equitable, livable, and sustainable. I've been doing that my whole career. I've spent my entire career in different elements of urban planning. My first decade in New York, I moved 9 times in years, but I stayed consistent in my career in that I spent my 20s managing public spaces, primarily Bryant Park, 34th Street Partnership, parts of Chelsea, and meatpacking. I loved public spaces and making them work for people. After business school at Columbia, working full-time while going to school, I went into municipal finance because I wanted to understand how you fund government. Infrastructure. And then ultimately I worked for the state of New York, most recently as the Secretary for Economic Development, overseeing all economic development for the state, as well as housing and arts and cultural support for the state. And this cross-section of managing public spaces, making them work for people, doing job creation for the state of New York, and overseeing housing are exactly the pieces of the pie that we need to put into play in the borough president's role. We need to make this city, in this challenging time, use this opportunity to really think very carefully about all the tools of how we get truly affordable housing. Mandatory inclusionary housing isn't enough alone. Zoning processes that really cater to large-scale luxury redevelopments aren't going to cut it. Piecemeal development of public spaces and green space and piecemeal development of resiliency projects aren't going to leave us better prepared for the next 100-year storm. And we need to use this really challenging moment to put New York ahead. And I think there are so many examples of people rising above in New York to think critically and think creatively about how to make our future work in a more sustainable, more equitable way. And I think we have to think historically about the wrongs that our country has done, even in urban planning, to make it right from the perspective of systemic racism and climate justice. Throughout my time in New York, I have been motivated by this tremendous community. I've been on 2 different community boards, Community Board 7 right there on the Upper West Side when I first moved to the city.
Right.
And as a public member.
Can you make this your last comment? You're
Sure.
at time. Thank
Sure.
you, Ms. Boylan.
Sure. And I'm just very excited to be here. It's a real honor to have this opportunity, and it will be an honor to be your borough president.
Thank you so much, Ms. Boylan. My first question to you, and just as by way of background to everyone, I'm going to be asking, as to the extent practical, similar questions of all the candidates. Recently this summer, due to COVID-19 and to facilitate social distancing within shelters, there were the placement of a few new temporary emergency shelters on the Upper West Side. It has caused passionate debate and a lawsuit. And then eventually Mayor de Blasio decided to relocate residents at the Lucerne to the Radisson downtown. And that has caused further litigation with different parties seeking to intervene. In your view, should the residents in these shelters, and particularly the Lucerne, remain in their present temporary accommodations for the duration of the pandemic?
Yes, they should. I think it's pretty simple to say. The community that I've seen and interacted with has really built up a support system and wraparound services to support the men currently housed at the Lucerne. And I think we risk creating a really bad policy By moving them, we risk, most importantly, harming their sense of stability, which when you're experiencing homelessness is a critical thing. I think there are other ways. There are many other ways, almost an infinite number of ways that I think the mayor could have done a better job at dealing with this. And, I hear concerns about issues of livability and safety on the Upper West Side, but I must say, everything I've heard has next to little to nothing to do with men currently housed in the Lucerne. I think with respect to livability and urban walkability, which is a totally separate issue, we can address those things and not malign a group of men who are, trying to find a stable sense of home. And we're doing the safe thing by removing them from congregate shelters, which we have to do in a pandemic. So they should stay where they are.
Thank you. Before I continue, I would like to recognize Assemblymember Linda Rosenthal, who is with us, Community Board 7 Chair Mark Diller, and also the West Side Democrats district leaders. My next question is regarding an proposed rezoning in Morningside Heights. The Morningside Heights Community Coalition has put together a plan primarily between 110th and 125th Street to try to pursue an MIH rezoning. So, in short, reducing density along the side streets, increasing density along the avenues in order to accommodate MIH rezoning. What are your views on the plan? Do you support the plan as it is?
I think, I need to learn more about how much the community is in support of this. I don't think that, as I said earlier, mandatory inclusionary housing is nearly enough to cover all the housing needs we have. And, I'm in support of increasing housing access and community-led development, but not for the purposes or the benefit of a single or a group of developers.
Thank you for your answer. My next question also related to planning. Recently, the City Council has introduced a comprehensive planning bill to essentially engage in a city-wide process of comprehensive planning. Community board statements of need go up to a city-wide board. They formulate a plan, they go back and forth. And then essentially, if projects that go along with a comprehensive plan would get to go forward, unless they get called up by the council on an individual basis, and projects that are not aligned with the plan and different uses in the capital funds would then automatically have to be called up on such a basis. Do you support comprehensive planning as a requirement in New York City across the different community districts?
I support comprehensive planning as a way to more accurately get at our housing needs. I mean, if you look at the middle piece of the 20th century, a majority of people were getting housing assistance in some way, shape, or form. And now we have very little of that. And people are severely rent burdened. So I do think we need comprehensive planning. I'm not sure that I'm entirely behind the specific process here, but I do think we need much more thought behind the approach to affordable housing, because frankly, it's not affordable and there's not enough of it. And we're not catering to the specific needs of our community, and we're not creating nearly enough of it via mandatory inclusionary housing and luxury bonuses, basically. So I am in favor of the principle. I'm still exploring whether or not I think this is the right avenue for it.
Thank you for your answer. Last question on housing. The West Side is losing and has lost for decades a number of SRO apartments. SROs, they're mixed views on SROs, but they tend to be able to house the lowest income people, often men, but not always. What would you do to try to preserve SROs on the West Side?
Yeah, I think we don't have nearly enough. I think that goes back to the broader question of deeply affordable housing. I know I have a number of friends who live in SROs, and I know there have been concerns about them in the past, particularly when I moved to New York. That was a big push to rid the city of SROs because of the perception of some kind of poor activity. But to your point, this is a critical way that people live in the city, and we're not offering any alternatives. And the fewer and fewer of them, the more challenges we have, especially when our voucher program doesn't actually cover the costs of living on the Upper West Side, for instance. I think we actually need to increase the what is covered under, how much vouchers cover to, and I know that there's a city bill to increase the amount of money covered in assistance. But I think we need to take a step back and find various ways through not specific neighborhood community rezoning, but different types of low-level upzoning that we can do to allow for increased housing, singles housing, but not just singles, also seniors housing. I mean, there was a lottery recently somewhere on the Upper West Side for a dozen or so, or a few dozen apartments, and there were thousands of applicants. So it's not just this issue. It's the fact that this amazing, wonderful place, for example, on the Upper West Side, has created such a desire to be there because it is amazing. And at the same time, we've made it impossible for our neighbors who've grown up and spent their entire lives there to stay there. And a lot of seniors are actually in that category, as they're in fixed income, and most frequently women fall into poverty in that rate. So I think we need to do a lot more, not just to find an alternative to SROs, but also to get additional housing for seniors more specifically, because that's something I'm hearing a lot about.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question, Alec? All right.
Yeah, there's 1 minute remaining for answers.
All right. So my quick question, something in a lot of people's minds has been vacant storefronts. What would you do to tackle the vacant storefront issue on the Upper West Side?
Well, I think, there's kind of the medium-term plan and the interim. One of the biggest issues we have is that all the incentives for landowners, real estate developers are to keep spaces empty. They get more benefit from empty real estate from a tax perspective than they do from renting to a low return tenant, so to speak. I think in the medium term, we have to change that to disincentivize this kind of practice. I also think everything that we do to increase livability and quality of life in our streets, including open streets, including outdoor dining, including parks and creative activities, mobile permitting in the interim for creators, comedians and the like, more things that we can do to draw people to our neighborhoods, particularly on the Upper West Side, the greater chance we have at saving some of our small businesses. I mean, we need federal aid in the interim, but this problem, let's face it, has been going on a long time before this crisis. I do think that there are ways to reinforce the quality of life that makes everything so wonderful in the Upper West Side and in New York City to attract, people want to shop locally. People want to be connected to the stores. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ms. Boylan, for joining us and for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
All right. So now we will hear from Kimberly Watkins. She is the chair of Community Education Council 3 and a candidate for Manhattan Borough President. So I think I saw that you were here, but if not, let me have you join us. All right. Can you hear us, Kim?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Great. So thank you for joining us. As I mentioned to the candidates, and I said in emails when reaching out to all of you, we're trying to ask as many of the same questions to the candidates as practicable. So my first question to you: this summer, a number of, in order to facilitate social distancing.
Pablo, do you want to start with introduction?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Thank you, Alec, for keeping me on track. Kim, please start with a 3-minute introduction.
It's quite all right. My cat jumped up on the table here. Say hello, kitty. At the same time, you were starting to talk, so I was a little distracted. Hello, everyone. It's so great to be here. I am Kim Watkins, and I am president of CEC3. I'll try to be quick so that we can have time for questions. I'm running a people-centered platform for Manhattan Borough President to fight for stronger local government. You know, a lot of New Yorkers don't trust our elected officials right now, and they have good reason not to. I want to champion fiscal responsibility and budget justice across every aspect of New York public life, and find solutions to our biggest challenges that we face. Affordable homes. I did get to hear some of your conversation with Lindsay. Good jobs for New Yorkers and great schools, among other things. I am the schools candidate in this race, and I have a 5-point plan I just released to tackle the biggest issues that we face in our public school system, starting with the abolishment of mayoral control. I also am focused on solving the funding issues, resource issues for schools, and a number of other things. All of this plan can be found at my website at kimwatkins.nyc. But I also want to make sure that you know that in addition to really focusing on the intersectionality that public schools have with the other big issues that we have, right? Because the public schools in Manhattan, all across New York City, are neighborhood anchors. So we derive a great deal of strength in our communities just by virtue of the strength of our schools. So where we have good schools, unfortunately, this is the case where the zip code where you live still does determine a great deal of your child's potential, and that's wrong. It's racist and it's sexist and it's just wrong, but it is true. So there is a real focus in my campaign on public education, but in terms of affordable homes, I am really focused, having been the recipient, to be fortunate enough to live in an HDFC, to want to really also focus on increased home ownership in Manhattan. There are several ways that I think we should be focusing on that issue. I also want to fight RADs, figure out a way to improve public housing without privatizing it. We need to stabilize our mom and shop business sector. We have got to figure out a way to bring control to rents and to use any means necessary, including things like eminent domain and other legal structures that would help us make sure that our streets have occupied retail businesses. And I really want to fight for multimodal transportation in our borough. I am a runner. I'm actually a marathon coach, and I'm running all 508 miles of this borough in order to see every inch of our street space and make sure that we have a good plan in place to reduce street usage by at least 20%. In the first 4
Ms.
years.
Watkins, that's about your 3 minutes.
Yeah, I think I got it all in there.
Thank you, Ms. Watkins. Thank you, Alec. So my first question I was gonna ask before it was really your time. It was really your time to give your opening pitch. This summer, a number of residents were moved to the Upper West Side from homeless shelters throughout the city in order to facilitate social distancing throughout COVID-19. It was one of probably the most controversial issues in the neighborhood this summer. There has been various efforts to litigate the move. The mayor agreed to move the residents of Lucerne specifically downtown to the Radisson and in the financial district, which spurred more waves of litigation and intervening by various parties. In your view, should the residents of the temporary emergency shelters remain through the duration of COVID-19 or not?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely, they should not be moved again. It's an embarrassment to our city that they moved as many times as they did, right? They moved to a different hotel first, and someone would manage to get them out of one hotel and into a different one. I think that a lot of the divisiveness over this issue gets to the heart of the very first thing that I said. and has to do with trust in local government. People know that something's going on behind closed doors in terms of who's making the money and who's doing the deal and who can make it happen to push the right buttons and make changes take place if they want to. And regular New Yorkers are over that kind of government, over those political decisions. Obviously, these men need the shelter that they're getting, and I like Lindsay, think that it is, you know, that the community that's been created there over these last several months is something that we need to protect and preserve, and it may be even eventually a good model for other types of situations moving forward. But it was not done very well. And there is a great deal of fear that in community neighborhoods, in families, with respect to how different communities interact with one another and what we do to make sure that there's transparent communication and trust as we move forward to make sure that the quality of life of everyone is strong and thriving.
Thank you, Ms. Watkins. So my next question is about potential rezoning in Morningside Heights. The Morningside Heights Community Coalition has come together to put forth a plan to between 110th and 125th Streets. Essentially, it would lead to downzoning on the side streets, upzoning on the main avenues, and initiate a mandatory inclusionary housing requirement in the rezoning area. Is this a plan that you support?
Well, I would have to say that I have not read the details of the plan to the extent that I would make a sort of a really intelligent decision in terms of this conversation with you and me. I would want to know and be engaged with the community before I said anything with any level of confidence. But what I will say, understanding that as the Chinatown community plan went through its process, in Washington Heights, the same thing went down. The East Harlem, same thing. Of course, we've all been talking about Soho and NoHo. The issues that relate to the community portion relative to the Planning Commission and the sort of elected official conversations that are going on, often behind closed doors, is still going to erupt into a really, we could script it out right now, what almost is going to be said. Lindsay said it earlier, that there isn't going to be enough, like mandatory inclusionary housing is philosophically a good idea, but will it make it enough apartments affordable enough for the people that need the number that we need, the capacity that we need? The answer, of course, we know is no. Will it drive people out because prices are going to go up as the newer development is in? Yes, we know that too. So people are going to fight over it, and it's going to end up in the courts, which should tell us that we need a different process. So I'm in favor of more affordable housing wherever we can get it, and we need to spread it out, and we need to make sure everyone does their fair share. But I do think, as a process, we are purposefully or knowingly kind of creating more of a storm than I think would be the case if we had a true larger planning process, which I think is your next question. So I'll stop there because I did listen in on that part of your conversation with Lindsay.
That is my next question. So there's a comprehensive planning framework. In short, it'll create an iterative process between community boards, a new city body, DCP, and the council, where there will be affirmative planning, and then for applications to differ from the comprehensive plan use, there will be a mandatory vote before the city council for applications to use land in accordance with the comprehensive plan. It can only be called up voluntarily. It's not required to be a vote or to elicit a vote. Is this a framework that you would support?
Yeah, I really think getting behind the idea of broader planning is a positive thing for our city. We have to be sort of, I think, really honest about the natural bubbles that we create by virtue of our really exciting and incredibly rich and diverse type of city, because obviously the best interests of one neighborhood are not going to necessarily be the best interests of another. And that natural tension, which is incredibly strong in terms of quality of life in some areas, we have seen results in and a lot of oppression in other parts of our city where the levers of power haven't been quite as strong. So we need a broader plan. The one thing that I will say that I think is also what we should do, what I would like to see us do more of, is have the conversation sort of expand out from the individual community board to neighboring boards and or potentially even the full borough as a function of what true needs are and what that sort of what the long-term consequences are for the types of development that we have. And that gets back to some of my other original points, which relate to the connection among our affordable homes or homes, our jobs market, where the jobs are, and where our schools are, because they do all impact one another. And I don't think that we're sort of seeing the forest through the trees sometimes when we just look at the homes market and think that if we solve this problem, then everything else is going to fall into place.
Thank you. Quickly, last question. I think in terms of time,
Got about 10 seconds left for an answer.
vacant storefronts.
Oh.
What is your how would you tackle vacant storefronts?
Well, listen, here's the thing about the SROs. I think they're great. We need more innovation in terms of thinking about the types of homes that people live in. But I go back to increasing home ownership, because if we could provide equity and like sort of a way to earn equity, a way to develop limited equity, then people would want to stay in their homes longer, and we would then also be able to pass them down from generation to generation. Thank you all so much. It was so much fun being here.
Thank you, Ms. Watkins, for joining us and for your time and your answers.
You're welcome.
Next, we have Council District 7 member Mark Levine. Council member, thank you for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure, Pablo. Great to see you and Alec, also my constituent. And it looks like the great Gail Brewer is on with us as well. And of course, nice to see my colleagues, Kim and Lindsay, if they're still on. We're speaking tonight on a day of enormous emotions. I know you share my rage at the attempted coup that occurred yesterday in the Capitol, and an act for which we need accountability, not just for the insurrectionists, but for everyone who has enabled the Trump cult, and obviously for Trump himself. Every hour that he remains in office is a danger to this republic. And the hostage video that he put out, reading from a teleprompter about 45 minutes ago, doesn't change that. He needs to go. But we do have major challenges here in New York City, and that's what's on the line in the elections in June. And I'm running for president to fight on behalf of the West Side, this borough, and the city. It's a fight that I've been engaged in my entire adult life. I started my career after college with a degree in physics. I became a bilingual math and science teacher and proud union member in District 7 in the South Bronx, at Junior High School 149. I went on to found a community development credit union in Washington Heights, kind of like a nonprofit, cooperatively owned bank that has made now $25 million in microloans to low-income families uptown, helping them do everything from buy their first home computer to start a small business. I'm proud now to have been elected 2 terms in the 7th District, one of the most diverse in the city. It includes, of course, a part of the West Side, 96th Street North, part of this former CFB, now West Side Dems territory. It includes West Harlem and Southern Washington Heights, where I live with my family, our 2 boys, public school students, 1 high school, 1 CUNY. And in my first term, I chaired the Parks Committee, where I fought to deliver millions of dollars to green space. In this term, I'm chairing the Health Committee, where I have fought day and night against this pandemic, fighting for science, for equity, no matter who I had to take on at any level. And I'm running now to be borough president to take this fight even higher on behalf of tenants, on behalf of mom and pop stores, on behalf of economic and racial justice, on behalf of the environment, of sane climate policy, of reimagining our streets and reinvesting in green space. And I am thrilled now to have a chance to talk to you, West Side Dems, about what's at stake in this big primary to succeed the amazing Gail Brewer as we fight to bring back our neighborhood, our borough, our city in a way that is stronger, healthier, and more just. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you.
Thank you, Councilmember Levine. And I see on my panelist window, we have our outgoing Borough President, Gail Brewer, who will be joining us for the Council District 6 Forum. So thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to switch this up a little bit because I want to get through more material than we have so far. My first question comes from Nick in the chat or in the Q&A button. It says, a question for all candidates: how will you handle, what is your view on member deference in terms of votes? Obviously, the borough president is not in the council, but they're intimately involved in the land use process, and you are a council member currently. So, what is your view on member deference and how that relates to our borough?
Thank you, Pablo, and thank you, Nick, for that important question. Of course, the borough president is not a member of the city council, but has a major voice in land use. So this is certainly a relevant question. And member deference is something which is important, but shouldn't be seen as sacrosanct. Obviously, a local member of the city council knows their district best, but there may be cases where we have a citywide imperative that that means that the body as a whole might go in a different direction. And that could be an imperative to develop more affordable housing, for example. So again, important, but not sacrosanct. And, I might use this to transition into the Morningside Heights question, if appropriate, Pablo.
Sure, please.
Which is, I think, a great way to frame my view of zoning. Obviously, I represent Morningside Heights, and I've been working for years now with an incredible coalition, the Morningside Heights Community Coalition, the Community Board 9, and other players to develop a really balanced plan, which will protect the neighborhood, which hasn't been rezoned, since 1961, to protect against wildly out of context mid-block behemoths, two of which are going up around Broadway and 121st Street by imposing a height limit, but would also add some density to the avenues, to Broadway and Amsterdam, which will require some affordable housing. Right now, the buildings that are going up are all luxury, and has the potential also to get some transit improvements, particularly at 125th Street on the 1 train, not in your club territory, but part of Morningside Heights. So this is a project which was driven by the community. The community had a really empowered voice. Proud that Gail Brewer has been a partner of this and a co-applicant on the project, and reflects my view of balanced development, which protects the integrity of neighborhoods, but prioritizes creating more affordable housing, which really is an emergency for Morningside Heights and every community of this borough.
Thank you, council member. My next question is on comprehensive planning. Do you support the bill that was introduced recently on comprehensive planning for the council?
Absolutely. And if it doesn't happen citywide, then I'm going to push it as a borough-wide comprehensive plan. We need a master plan for Manhattan, which takes a borough-wide view at where we're developing affordable housing and where we're placing all types of facilities, including things like homeless shelters, that looks to complete a unified network of bus lanes, of bike lanes, that takes a borough-wide view as opposed to the single private developer-driven project-by-project land use process, which has really dominated for decades. So I support a citywide comprehensive plan, and failing that, we're going to do it for the borough of Manhattan if I'm borough president.
Thank you. You mentioned transportation. We have very little select bus service in the Upper West Side. 79 piece comes to mind, but not much beyond that. Do you see any opportunity for SBS along the avenues on the Upper West Side for the future?
Absolutely. This has been a wildly successful program. that has not required huge capital investment, and that, unlike improvements to subways, doesn't take decades to complete. I'm a huge advocate of investing energy and resources into buses to speed them up. I think that's probably the biggest bang for the buck. And remember that the ridership of our buses tends to be lower income relative to subways, more likely to have people of color, more likely to have seniors, more likely to have people with disabilities. So there's an equity angle here as well. I am a supporter of a technology known as Transit Signal Priority, TSP. I've passed legislation to dramatically increase the pace of TSP technology. This is amazing. It turns the light green when the bus approaches the intersection, so that there's no time spent at a red light for bus riders. It shaves 21% off the travel time for buses in Manhattan. We need it on every line. And finally, I'll mention that I'm pushing a really exciting project, a policy, a bill to make bus fares free in New York City for the equity angle that I mentioned, to boost ridership, to get people on mass transit as we come out of this epidemic.
Thank you. And a quick last question. I think we're going low on time. Open streets. We had open streets, extensively in the summer. They've been pared back. There's always been a tug of war here between the community board and DOT. Do you support year-round open streets? And while we're at it, open sidewalk dining, al fresco dining in New York City, in our borough.
Absolutely. And, Pablo, this crisis has also given us the opportunity to go big on policy change in ways that might not have been possible a year ago. And there's no better example of that than outdoor dining, which I'm really proud the city council pushed. We passed legislation to make it happen. And I think it's been an unmitigated success. And it needs to be permanent and year round. And as far as I'm concerned, it will be both on sidewalks and on street space. What a great use of that precious space. It's about economic vitality. It's about bringing life to our streets. And it's a policy that should remain. So I'm going to keep that one short in case you want to get that question on storefronts or anything else you want to fit in the last minute.
Sure, I'll ask the question on storefronts. How do we tackle the vacant storefront issue?
Well, this is just a critical issue. We are losing small business at a terrifying rate. And we need to do more to protect those businesses which remain by getting them rent relief, by getting them direct financial assistance, by getting them access to credit, by getting them relief from punitive fines and fees. And we need to change the game for landlords who are keeping storefronts vacant. And I do support a vacancy tax. I think that my friend Brad Hoyman just joined us, and he's been a great advocate for this as well. So credit where it's due. It would require state legislation. So let's change the game to make sure that landlords fill storefronts. If that happens, entrepreneurs will step in. This is still the most entrepreneurial city on earth. We're going to have new innovative businesses open if the rent lowers enough to bring people in.
Thank you, Councilmember Levine, for coming in for your service of our district. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Pablo and Alec and everybody. And wish you, hope you will stay safe out there during these challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate who's with us today is Elizabeth Caputo, former chair of Community Board 7. Do we have you here, Elizabeth?
I think in the attendees list.
Okay, we will get you up to the panelist. She'll be with us shortly. Or she's here, but she'll be on shortly.
I am completely here. Hope you can all see me. I am here.
Yes, we see you. Thank you so much,
Great.
Elizabeth, for being with us. Please introduce yourself and give your opening remarks.
Sure, I'm really grateful to see so many good friends from my hometown, my neighborhood for the last 25 years. The folks formerly known as Community Free Democrats who are now the West Side Democrats, and I'm grateful to talk to you for a few minutes tonight. I guess I'd just like to start out, I know we have a limited time, just to acknowledge what's happened in our city over the last, in our country over the last 24 hours. I live and work my day job. I work full time for a global organization, and I think what's happened is really hit not just the city but the country and the world in a really profound way. And I'm very optimistic about what President-elect Biden will bring. I'm very saddened by what's happened over the last 24 hours. So in any event, I'll leave it there and just give you a few words about who I am. Most of you have known me from my time being your Community Board 7 chair for 3.5 years, the longest serving elected chair on the Upper West Side, the first. I have called New York my home my entire adult life. And I bring a lot of experience to serving the neighborhood that we all live in. I'm excited to talk to you tonight about some of your questions. And I've lived here in Manhattan throughout its toughest days, 9/11, 2008, the financial crisis, Superstorm Sandy, and now a global pandemic where New York City has really been at the epicenter. And I have worked, and my style has always been to bring Manhattan communities together. And I will do that to bring my commitment and energy to local government as we recover and rebuild. My style is a problem solver. I have an extensive background in municipal finance, where I have run local infrastructure projects, both through the city and throughout the country. And I, again, mentioned that I'm the longest serving chair of Manhattan Community Board 7, where we dealt with a lot of issues, where sometimes we agreed and sometimes we just didn't disagree, but where I always had your interests in mind. I'm running because we need strong, innovative leadership right now. I believe very strongly that our city leadership has failed us time and time again, whether it's dealing with the pandemic. Career politicians are not what we need right now, whether it's the fiscal crisis, tough decisions we need to make in the coming days and weeks. And I want to be that person who delivers the real innovative solutions to complex challenges. I believe very strongly, as I've said to many of you, I believe that Manhattan is the core of the Big Apple. I want to be the person who actually helps represent you to bring that forward. So I'm all in. I've been working really hard, talking to so many of you in recent days and months since I have announced my candidacy. And again, I just believe very strongly that we need qualified new leadership to move Manhattan forward. My career has been one of building bridges, global and local, public and private, neighborhood and neighborhood. At the heart of everything I have done, I have placed community, inclusivity, and equity at the heart of everything I do.
Ms.
We have an
Caputo, that's about 3
opportunity coming out of
minutes.
this to emerge stronger, and I want to work with all of you to make this a city and a borough that's better. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Caputo, for your answer and for being with us today. I'm going to switch it up a little bit, as I did with Councilmember Levine, just to keep our audience listening and engaged. So we have a question. How can we improve our garbage disposal system?
Sure. Is that a question about our garbage disposal system related to composting, or is it related to how we deliver our garbage just generally across the streets given the pandemic?
I think the question was general, but you can take any angle you'd like on it.
Sure. We've been working really hard at Community Board 7 to actually get the composting back on the Upper West Side in particular. So hopefully, in addition to what's happening near the Museum of Natural History, where there was the initial composting site, we're actually doing it at Riverside, down in the lower 60s, and up, most importantly, in NYCHA developments. And I believe very strongly, one thing I did not mention is my work with NYCHA over the years to bring not only a NYCHA task force at Community Board 7, but actually to bring things like prioritizing things like composting and equity in how trash and sanitation gets built in those neighborhoods. That would be a huge priority of mine as Community Board 7 chair, or sorry, as Borough President.
Thank you for that answer. My next question is on transportation. We have very little select bus service on the Upper West Side. That's apart from the M79 route that is in our neighborhood. Do you see any opportunities for select bus service on the Upper West Side?
Sure. Thank you very much for that question. And I work every day 24/7 in my day job, working on safer, cleaner, greener, and more equitable forms of transportation, not just throughout the Upper West Side, but throughout the world. I believe very strongly that select bus service is critically important. I believe not just along the avenues that we currently have it, but we need to do more of it. And I'm also want to just make sure that people know that I did not make clear in my opening statement that mass transit to me is the great equalizer of our city. And I'm going to be the candidate that brings it back and make sure that it's equitable for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer. My next question. There were a number of residents who were moved out of downtown shelters and shelters throughout the city to facilitate social distancing during COVID-19. A few were placed in temporary emergency shelters on the Upper West Side, and the one that particularly has been a flashpoint has been at the Lucerne. The mayor has decided to move men after litigation and threats of litigation to the Radisson, the financial district, and there have been even more attempts to intervene in the litigation thus far. Do you support or oppose moving the men from the Lucerne and other residents of the temporary shelters out of their current locations on the Upper West Side?
Sure. I've said consistently throughout the 6 months, and I believe I'm the only candidate who has actually represented this district for the last 10 years, where we have had a quality of life and homelessness crisis for a very long time. Those men and those people who have lived in Lucerne have a right to stay there. I believe in what the mayor has said that needs to get done. What I don't believe in is political pandering. And what I don't believe in is people who have had a very long time to propose and present a long-term plan for how to best serve these families and men and women who are underserved. Every neighborhood has to do its part, downtown, where we live here on the Upper West Side, everywhere else. What I want to do is do things equitably and make sure we're doing it in a responsible way so that these men, women, and families have a chance to have their best quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. My next question is relating to open streets. There was a long period where open streets were, available and present on, particularly on West End Avenue, also where I live in Amsterdam, right off of Amsterdam Avenue and other places in the neighborhood. There's been a constant tug of war, as you know, than I would, being a CP7 member, in terms of preserving our open streets scheme here. Do you believe open streets should remain year-round and even past the pandemic?
I believe strongly in open streets. As you mentioned, I've not just been a member of the community board, I've actually been the chair. I've been an executive who has chaired the board, and I have had to make some very tough decisions over the years, whether it's a bike lane or a city bike. And one of the things I talk to when I talk to people, whether it's people from transportation alternatives or people who are representing families who, are very concerned about their safety, is that we need to be talking to everyone. And when I have gotten things done, I've gotten them done because I've talked to people who oftentimes don't agree. And I think one of the best things about leadership is, and for this particular job as borough president, is making sure you have somebody who can have your same goals in mind. I support open streets. I support the economic development of these restaurants staying open and us giving the rent relief and the working with the private sector and the public sector that we need truly to get these avenues open. And I think it's been a huge positive for our neighborhood in recent months, despite the weather. What we need to do is work together to get those things done. And we cannot do that with purity tests and saying we're not going to be talking to certain groups or certain people. So one of the things I did very well as a community board chair, I got the Amsterdam Avenue bike lane in, I got the Columbus Avenue bike lane in, and I got City Bike here. And I got those things through, not because I thought they were the best things to do, but I did it by talking to everyone in the community. And that's exactly how I will represent you as your community, as you are borough president.
Thank you. My next question is on comprehensive planning. Do you support or oppose the city council's current comprehensive planning framework?
Are you talking about specific to zoning ULURP or?
So they have a framework, basically that creates an iterative process between community boards, DCP, the council, and a new body to help facilitate the process. And they'll create some affirmative planning as far as what kinds of uses are desired. If the use is consistent with what the plan sets forth, it would only be voluntarily called up by the council for a vote. If a use is inconsistent with the planned use, then it would have to go through a council vote in order to get through to get approved. What is your?
I believe that we have to be utilizing the community boards more than we are. I've been a consistent believer in community board process, and the ULURP process needs to be reformed. It's clear that we need to be providing more units of affordable housing. 44%, for many of you know this already, but everyone is rent burdened right now. Many of them pay at least half their income towards rent. I believe very strongly we're a city of islands. We cannot develop out, we have to develop up. I believe in changes to zoning that are responsible, that allow basically allow higher density construction, and that are part of solving what we all know is an affordable housing crisis. And I've been working on this firsthand throughout my time as a member and as chair of Community Board 7. So I believe very strongly that we need to think about environmental, racial, economic concerns of every neighborhood. And we need to be thinking about public transit, making sure that public transit is a top priority for anything that we do. So like I said before, and I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but I believe very strongly in the zoning process and making sure it factors all those things top of mind, given what we're going through right now in this pandemic.
Thank you, Ms. Caputo, for joining us and for all of your answers. We really, really appreciate it for your service. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Great. So next we have State Senator Brad Hoyman of the 27th State Senate District. Senator Hoyman, please begin your opening remarks.
Thanks, Pablo. State Senator Brad Hoyman. Great to see so many people online. I'm representing both the east and the west side of Manhattan. I'm one of the few senators who spans the entire island. It's been an honor to do that. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself, my background, what I've done in Albany, and my plans for the office. First, though, I do want to say, you know, yesterday's events at the Capitol were absolutely outrageous, heart-wrenching, and created like revulsion in so many of us, you know, clear-eyed Americans. We need to remove Donald Trump from office as soon as possible. I signed a letter to that effect that Senator Liz Krueger circulated. We need to invoke the 25th Amendment. He's a threat to our country, as are the domestic terrorists who perpetrated that violence. But back to our program. I grew up in rural West Virginia. I don't know how many of you know that. In a town so small that to get to my house, you had to take a left at the barn that said, chew mail pouch tobacco, treat yourself to the best. I had a mom, though, who believed in education, and I was a very voracious reader. I won a scholarship, got out of West Virginia, found my way to New York City 27 years ago, have been with my husband 26 years, and we have two small children, a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old. As I like to say, we're the oldest parents on our first marriage here in Manhattan. But I became active in my local community board, the local block association, my local political club, and eventually succeeded Tom Dwayne when the seat became open in the Senate. I've been proud to sponsor considered some of the most consequential legislation in Albany over the last few years with our new Democratic supermajority, including the Child Victims Act, which I sponsored with Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal, which allows the survivors of child sexual abuse to seek redress and to identify predators. I passed legislation that will allow Congress to access Donald Trump's tax returns. I passed legislation that will protect children from vaccine preventable illnesses. And I've suffered a lot of slings and arrows for that, including threats against my husband, me, and my kids, which is really hard to believe. And I passed the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, which has protected tenants in their homes during the pandemic, as well as legislation that will allow the new COVID-19 vaccine to be distributed by pharmacists. I myself went on a vaccine trial in August. I definitely did not get the placebo because I had some mild side effects, and I have so many antibodies. If you cut me, I bleed antibodies. So that vaccine really works. I'm really proud of New Yorkers for participating in the trial and developing the vaccine. But I want to see a Manhattan that is equitable. I want to see a Manhattan that saves our small businesses. I sponsor legislation called Save Our Storefronts. You can read more about it at saveourstorefronts.nyc. I want to see Manhattan with new public spaces and new affordable housing. We have 20 million square feet of empty office space sitting in Midtown Manhattan. We can use
Senator, we're about at 3 minutes.
in the arts. And finally, I want to see a Manhattan that's economically equitable, that allows young people and artists to move here. We have to save Broadway and our small venues. And I have a record of getting things done in Albany, Pablo. I'm going to put that same energy into fighting for Manhattan as borough president. We live in the best borough in the greatest city in the world, and we have to keep it that way.
Thank you, Senator Hoyman. You mentioned storefronts. Storefronts were a heavy topic of concern coming in. The questions that came in advance of this forum. What would you do as borough president to tackle our empty storefront issue?
Well, I got to give credit to the current borough president for her time in the council in passing formula retail zoning on the Upper West Side, really landmark legislation in that regard. I have legislation that would extend that, and we certainly need to get rid of the commercial rent tax below 92nd Street, at least during the pandemic. I have legislation that would allow tenants to pay a percentage of their revenue to their landlord with support from the state of New York to make up the difference. I piloted that at Grand Central Station, where we saved a number of small businesses that couldn't pay the rent. And finally, we need a vacancy tax, another bill that I sponsor in Albany. Landlords should not kick tenants out, particularly our small businesses, and keep the space open without some sort of disincentive. That is bonkers to me. It happens all over our borough. We've seen our restaurants suffer as a result of that, and our dry cleaners and our shoe stores. There's not going to be anything left unless we get the landlords back to the table. We can pass legislation like that in the city council with the sponsorship of the borough president, and work with Albany to put some teeth in that as well.
Thank you, Senator Hoyman, for that answer. My next question relates to the men of Lucerne and all the temporary residents or all the residents of temporary emergency shelters on the Upper West Side. Many were moved in the spring and summer. Of course, there are a lot of strong feelings on the issue on many sides of it. And the mayor then agreed to move the men of the Lucerne to the Radisson downtown, and which spurred a lot of litigation, counter litigation, lots of attempts to intervene. As borough president, or even your current role, do you support moving the men downtown from the Lucerne to the Radisson, or not?
Absolutely not. I believe that you need to look in the eyes of those unhoused New Yorkers and treat them just like citizens of the city of New York, who they are. They deserve self-determination and dignity in their housing choices. It's shameful that the mayor has denied it to them. I'm proud to have signed on as an amicus representative to that lawsuit, and so thankful to Michael Hiller and the group of New Yorkers, particularly the neighbors who have come out in droves to support their neighbors. That's what it's about. We cannot move New Yorkers like they are chattel simply because some people think they are inconvenienced as a result. I stand by my support for the Lucerne. I will be unwavering in supporting unhoused New Yorkers in that regard.
Thank you, Senator Hoyman, for your answer. My next question relates to comprehensive planning. There's a new initiative in the City Council that will create, as I described, I think you were with us when Ms. Caputo was on, an iterative process between community boards and their statements of needs and their mapping out of their needs for the whole district. A new city body that will be formed to facilitate this, Department of City Planning and the council will try to align land use, capital projects, investments, and for projects where it'll be in a 5-year cycle, for projects that are consistent with the designated use for a given area, a call up for a vote in the council if would be merely optional or voluntary. For a project that is inconsistent with the use that's set forth in the plan, there would have to be a mandatory vote in order to pass that kind of project. Is that a framework that you support or oppose at this point?
Well, I think it certainly has a lot of merit. I look forward to seeing, how the council decides it. What I'd like to see is align that kind of effort with 197As. Community-based planning is really the heart of the borough president, and the way the borough president, as the current office holder, has done, convene elected officials, stakeholders, and community boards. I'd like to replicate and actually have every community board, should they choose, institute a 197A community-based planning process. There is no more important time than now to get planning right. We risk either becoming a burnt out shell from the 1970s or Disneyland for the super rich. We don't want either of those alternatives, and community-based planning can be the pathway forward to a post-COVID-19 New York City, and in particular Manhattan. Thank
you, Senator Hoyman. My next question relates to select bus service. There is not much select bus service on the Upper West Side apart from the M79 route. Do you see opportunities for select bus service to grow?
Of course. Let's talk about busways. I love buses. Buses need to be cool again, like they are in places like London and other world cities. I'm very proud of the fact that I was one of the originators of the 14th Street busway that is basically buses only. And there was a lot of concern that, cars are going to go to the side streets. We're going to have trucks, in front of our school or our brownstones. That hasn't panned out. It's worked remarkably well. It's sped travel times. And you know what else has worked? It's sped up ambulance travel times. So I think yes, SBS for sure, but let's go one step farther and lay out busways across Manhattan, east to west. I'm a senator, as I said, who represents both the east and the west side of Manhattan. One of my colleagues was once up in the Senate was bragging the fact that she represents a district that's so large that it takes her 4 hours to drive from one side of her district to the other. This is in the North Country. I told her that I represent both of the east and west side of Manhattan. Sometimes it takes us 4 hours to drive from one side of Manhattan to the other. Shouldn't be that way.
Thank you, Senator Hoyman. My next question is the one I haven't asked the previous candidates, but I think it's really important. What would you do to help seniors age in place and support their mobility for our seniors on the Upper West Side?
Well, we certainly need more NORCs. I'm proud to represent Penn South. We need more Penn Souths. This is, again, a housing opportunity bonanza with 20 million square feet of empty office space. We need the state working hand in glove with the city to make certain that we have affordable co-ops and new Mitchell Llamas that that don't rely on market forces to provide affordability to our seniors. We can do it. We did it 40 years ago. We could do it today. This may be the moment when we have all this empty office space and finally we have a federal government that should be in alignment with us, both in the Senate and the House and the President, and real committed, elected officials like Congressman Nadler, who can work with us to make these NORCs and other senior housing affordable. Seniors should not be forced out of their houses. Young people should have the opportunity to move to New York City. Unfortunately, the pressure on those two age categories is enormous, and we need to fix it if we want to save the heart and soul of Manhattan.
Thank you, Senator Hoyman, for your time and for your service and for being with us today, this evening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks to all of your viewers.
Yeah, thank you. And then now to close this out, but certainly last but certainly not least, is Council Member Ben Kalos. He represents Yorkville and parts of the Upper East Side. And Councilmember Kalos, thank you for joining us, for being with us this evening. And please begin your opening remarks.
Before I begin, I just want to say, I think all of us are somehow in shock, as if anything could surprise us after the past 4 years. Just what we saw in the Capitol. I don't think any of us ever thought there would be a day that people would come into our nation's capital, let alone any capital, wielding guns with an insurrection trying to stop the democratic transition of power. If 4 years of Trump was a trauma and the pandemic was another huge trauma, yesterday was almost a killing blow for our nation. And I'm just looking forward to bringing some semblance of normalcy back. 13 days, and just if we need to remove him beforehand, we should have removed him a long time ago. We need to do that. I want to just thank all of our sponsors tonight for hosting tonight's forum, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm Councilmember Ben Kalos. I'm co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, and I'm running for Manhattan Borough President because anywhere else in America, people struggle to get out. But here in New York City, people struggle to stay. And together, I believe that we can fix it. I grew up right here in Manhattan. I graduated from Bronx High School of Science and our state university system. Living with a single mom, sharing a room with her, living with my grandparents. I was on free and reduced school lunch, and I was so ashamed for the other kids to find out how poor I was that I just didn't eat. And that's why I fought to make breakfast after the bell. We got free school lunch, and now I want to offer every single student free supper as part of universal after school. As a tenant in a market rate 1-bedroom apartment with my wife and daughter, and you may hear in the background, we had a landlord spike our rent and force us out during a difficult high-risk pregnancy. And I can tell you firsthand that even with thousands of vacant apartments, Manhattan still has an affordable housing crisis. Developers get billions in tax breaks, corrupt politicians get thousands in campaign contributions, and tenants like us pay for it all. That's why when I ran for city council, I refused big money from real estate developers, corporations, and lobbyists. Then I wrote the law so more progressive candidates could run the right way and win. When thousands of people took to the streets to demand the city council hold the NYPD accountable, I listened, and I'm the only candidate in this race who voted to defund the police. Together, we can elect a new city council and borough president who haven't been corrupted by real estate and corporate money. We can prioritize a worker-led recovery. Join our team to fight for a city where we no longer have to struggle to stay. We can win a city for all of us.
Thank you, Councilmember Kalos, for being with us and for your remarks. My first question for you is about comprehensive planning. The city council put together an initiative, as you know, they put together legislation to engage in the 5-year comprehensive planning cycles. I'm sure I don't need to summarize the legislation for you, being a council member. Do you support the bill?
I put in the initial legislative service request for the legislation 7 years ago. So I'm one of the co-prime sponsors with Speaker Corey Johnson. I'm grateful to hear other people at this forum are supporting my legislation. And let me just make it clear and simple. Mayor de Blasio won't build affordable housing on the Upper East Side. All the affordable housing initiatives that have happened in my district, I've had to do working with everyone but this administration. We've done 1,000 units of affordable housing, and we actually had to work with Governor Cuomo to do it on Roosevelt Island, where we opened 300 new affordable apartments. We preserved 600 affordable apartments, and we've been working on our own with individual developers and providers to build housing for the homeless all over my district, including across the street from where I live. And we need a comprehensive plan that mandates each neighborhood do their fair share to build affordable housing, to build services for the homeless. And the next council member, when I pass this legislation, will be in a position to take a comprehensive plan and say, where's the affordable housing you owe me? And it doesn't matter who the mayor is, they better follow the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Council Member Kalos, for your answer. My next question relates to the Lucerne. As you know, there were residents who moved out of shelters downtown and otherwise to facilitate social distancing because of COVID-19. There were 4 temporary emergency shelters placed in the Upper West Side for men and women. The Lucerne, it's for men. That's probably the placement that has engendered the most controversy. Do you support or oppose the mayor's recent decision to move the men to the Radisson Hotel and to persist in the litigation to defend that move?
Oppose. When I got elected in 2015, 65,000 people was the high watermark for the number of people who woke up in a homeless shelter. And it was Yom Kippur. I was fasting for 26 hours. And I said to my rabbi, right as we finished services, Rabbi, how do we solve the homeless crisis? And so we formed an East Side Task Force for Homeless Outreach and Services. I co-founded it with Borough President Gail Brewer. The cost of sitting at my tables, you have to be willing to build supportive housing, shelter beds anywhere in the neighborhood, including across the street. And so we've done it. We've built supportive housing for formerly homeless women and children across the street from where I live. They're going to the same school my daughter will go to. And that's a city I want to live in. When the homeless needed to get out of the shelters, which I support, and we needed to get them into hotels, which I also support, we opened a hotel the same size as the Lucerne in my district. And my task force, Gail Brewer and I, we welcomed them with open arms. There was no litigation, and they are still there, and they can stay there forever. Last but certainly not least, this morning, 17,000 children woke up in a homeless shelter, 18,000 parents, 35,000 families. Sorry, 35,000 people in our shelters are just families. These are people who were evicted. And that's 10,000 families total between all 35,000. Incidentally, there are people running around saying that the city's dead because there's 10,000 vacant apartments. What I see and what I put an op-ed out with, Fred Shack from Urban Pathways, is let's rent every single one of those 10,000 apartments today. Let's get those families out of the shelters. Let's end homelessness for our families as we know it in our city. And here's the crazy part. We spend $6,000 to house a family in a shelter. That is much more expensive than even 2 bedrooms in my district. And I would welcome a homeless family next door. That's the New York City I want to wake up in.
Thank you, Councilmember Kalos, for your answer. My next question is on select bus service. We don't have a ton of it on the Upper West Side. We do have the M79. Do you see more opportunities for SBS on the Upper West Side?
So I don't own a car. I'm not sure if I'm the only candidate who doesn't own a car, but I don't own a car. If I'm getting somewhere, it's by public transportation, or it's on a bike, or it's relying on our public infrastructure. So this is personal for me. When I got elected, I pushed for the M79 select bus service and the M86 bus service. So if you've got the select bus service on the west side, it's because at least East Siders and West Siders can agree that that's a good thing. I was also trying to get M96 select bus service, but what I will tell you is I've met with Andy about this personally, about getting more select bus service, and the city's actually been moving away from it, because what we can do is get all the features of select bus service without calling it select bus service per se. So we can get all door payment, we can get tap and go on all the entrances, we can get bus lanes, period, everywhere, we can have busways everywhere, we can give bus signal priority, and this is all part of the Bus Fast Forward campaign that I've been working on with the Transit Center and others. In fact, I even created a new technology system. We use bus time transponders to track every single bus in the system to actually improve bus traffic throughout the city. We've added bike share in my district, we've added ferries. It is now, and don't forget the fact that we actually cut the ribbon on the 2nd Avenue subway, which we need to extend south and north and connect the upper east and upper west side and central Harlem. So we've done a lot in the district. I'd love to be able to do it for the rest of the borough.
Thank you, Councilmember Kalos, for your answer. My next question is about there is a rezoning proposal in Morningside Heights initiated by the Morningside Heights Community Coalition to try to engage in the MIH rezoning. It would downzone along the side streets. It would upzone along the avenues, and it would put in place MIH requirements. DCP rejected the proposal earlier in 2020, but the community would like to continue, and pursue this option. Is this a plan that you would support or oppose?
Got about a minute left.
I'm the only candidate for borough president and the only elected official in the borough other than Gail Brewer who has ever led a community-based rezoning. We rezoned Sutton to stop super talls and billionaires from taking over residential neighborhoods. I rezoned the borough of Manhattan with Gail Brewer and elected officials all over to stop super talls with empty spaces. You better believe that if I'm the next borough president, we will get this rezoning done.
Thank you. And a quick question, since we have 30 seconds, what would you do to help alleviate the frequency of empty storefronts on the Upper West Side?
Sure. So in 30 seconds to solve the small business empty storefronts, Gail Brewer did the small mom and pop rezoning. I'd like to see that for the rest of the borough. I've introduced legislation to offer grants to make these storefronts accessible and safe during coronavirus in exchange for lowering rent and extending the leases. I support the SBJSA, which is something a lot of folks are pushing for, and commercial rent control. These are things we can do in New York City. Without Albany, honestly, we do need Albany to act, do their jobs, and create a vacancy tax. That is a good idea. We just need real partners in Albany, or for them to repeal the Eurostat law and let us do our jobs.
All right, and I think with that, we are at time. Thank you so much, Councilmember Kalos, for joining us this evening.
Love the questions and love Alec Barrett's app. Thank you.
And with that, I want to thank all of you who have been with us for the portion of this event that's been dedicated to the Manhattan Borough President Forum. You have heard from all the candidates. Do not forget, primary day is June 22nd. That's a Tuesday. And petitioning will be starting towards the end of, we figure, towards the end of next month.